Hey peeps, my name is Nick, this is Board Game Brawl, and it is time to do another set of 10 games that are part of my Top 100 Games 2015 edition. These are the 100 games I love the most right this second in history, and we are going to be parceling them out 10 at a time. This week we are doing 80 to 71, and as usual we are going to have the second opinions of the users over at BoardGameGeek.com. So all of these games I love, other people may not feel quite the same way at all. And that's fine, but they deserve to be heard. So, let's get to it. My number 80 is A Study in Emerald, and it is new to the list this year. Now, last year I reviewed the game, or maybe it was very, very early this year, and I was kind of all over the place. No. It was actually definitely last year, because I actually did a 1 year later post-review of the game because I was so conflicted on it. The original first edition of the game from Martin Wallace and Tree Frog Games. And it's just a crazy game. It's a Cthulhu-based game, but it's based off of a Neil Gaiman short story of what would happen if Cthulhu and the other old gods took over the world back in the time of Sherlock Holmes, and Sherlock Holmes led the resistance, the underground resistance against the old ones, led by against the loyal people loyal to the old ones, led by Moriarty. And it's like an area control game and a deck building game, and there's some insane vampires and zombie mechanisms. The game was all over the place. And I really liked it, but I couldn't quite put it on my list last year. Now, a new second edition of the game was put out to much controversy. Many people think the game is dumbed down, as you will hear in a moment. And many people just think that it was unnecessary and that the first edition should have just been reprinted, which it has not been. That thing is never being reprinted ever again, I think, at this point. But really, the second edition is faster, it's more streamlined, it's not as clunky, it's not as fiddly, and it still gives you the same feeling of that game. So there are some nice things from the first edition that didn't make it over, and if you have the first edition and you love it, you and your group are fine with it, you don't need to bother with the second edition, but I think that the second edition is just perfectly fine for people who are not able to get the first. And any way you slice it, I've come to the conclusion that this is an awesome game that is worthy of respect and certainly my admiration. That is A Study in Emerald from Tree Frog Games, my number 80 of my Top 100 Games 2015 edition. However, as a second opinion, Rayufrusta, I never know how to pronounce that, says, worst remake since Psycho. Number 79 is Lords of Zibbet from Asmodee. Now, this was actually on last year's list, but it is down 31 spots from number 48. That's not due to any major reason. It's like so many other games on the list, it's only because I haven't played it as much in the past year, and because there are many new games on the list just pushing some of the older games back because they're newer and fresher in my mind. But Lords of Zibbet is actually a retheming of a game called Himalaya, both games being from designer Regis Bonasse. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that correctly, and I apologize, sir. And I call him Sir because he is also the designer of Seasons, which is a game that I like quite a bit, as many of you know from last year's list. Now, what's interesting is that this is actually in the same universe as Seasons, the land of Zibbet, and same artwork style, awesome artwork from Nayade, of course. One of my favorite artists, possibly my favorite board gaming artist. And in this game, in the original Himalaya, I think you were just trying to move your Sherpas around and with dog sleds. I don't know, but I kind of want to try it. This one is all about leading a small fantasy army around. You're all like these literal lords of Zibbet, and you are trying to gather the populace together to fight back these monsters that have been released on the land. This is a programmed movement game. You're literally programming simultaneously and revealing simultaneously where you want your troops to go, and then you're going to try to go to cities, collect people, and these real cool little miniatures of certain people of certain types, like wizards or warriors or peasants, and then use them to fight back monsters on other areas. And it's kind of a race to get to them first before the other players do. It's very frustrating at times, very stressful, but also very cool. And the game is gorgeous. It also has a very, very cool final scoring where you need to be really good in everything, but it's only the final type of score that matters. It's kind of complicated. Look it up. But in any case, Lords of Zibbet, it's still an awesome game. It seems to have fallen off the face of the earth, but it is still amazing, and hopefully they release an expansion for it one day. Who knows? You can always hope. However, as a second opinion, Graza Total says, its attempt at a mechanical salad falls into the uncanny valley. Redeeming factor, I would totally live in a city named after a number if that was a real thing. I just don't like it in my games. Number 78 is Shadowrun Crossfire. This is down 16 places from number 62 last year, so not a huge drop, and this is from Catalyst Game Labs. It's based off of the famous RPG Shadowrun, which I have actually played a couple of different editions of before. I briefly ran the Shadowrun campaign for the previous edition, not the one that's out right now. Shadowrun is a cyberpunk world that mixes magic. Not only is it like in the far future where there is all this high technology, but also magic has reawoken in the world, if that's a word. And it's got a great theme already. And what Shadowrun Crossfire is a deck building game, cooperative deck building game where you have characters that actually level up over time, sort of legacy style. You put stickers on them, and you just go from mission to mission. It's brutally difficult. In fact, if it was a little bit easier, it might be higher up on my list. It's a little intimidating how difficult it is at times. But still, it's a really interesting mechanisms. It's not like quite straight deck building. It's really cool how like cards you purchase go straight into your hand, things like that. So it's got a lot of interesting elements to it, and the fact that you can level up your characters, just like in the RPG, is a very nice touch. So, I think it's sitting at about the right place. It hasn't really been supported the way I would have expected it to. If a really big expansion comes out soon, you might see this scoot up the list quite a few spaces next year. But for now, that is Shadowrun Crossfire, my number 78. As a second opinion, though, Degenerate Elite says, shit. My number 77 is Origin. This is down 22 spaces from number 55 last year. Not a huge drop in the grand scheme of things. This is from Madagot and Asmodee, and Madagot is known for having games that have awesome components, and Origin is no exception whatsoever. This has gorgeous wooden components that are supposed to represent different tribes at the dawn of man as humans sprung up, started to build very primitive civilizations, and started to spread out to the different continents. So you have all these different wooden figures representing humans of different sizes, shapes, colors, and they spread out amongst the world, and there's it's an abstract game. It really essentially is, despite how beautiful it is. But you're trying to move them in such a way that you meet certain objectives, like get them to certain spots, and once they're in certain colored areas on the primitive map of the world, you can score objectives. And it's a very simple game. I definitely classify this as a gateway game, one of my favorite gateway games, obviously. And because it's so beautiful, and because it's so easy to learn, and because it has very nice, streamlined mechanisms, I really enjoy it. This is another game that doesn't get a lot of love, but it certainly should. That is Origin, my number 77 from Asmodee and Madagot. I think it's from Asmodee. Everything from Madagot is from Asmodee. As a second opinion, though, T. Godell says, it's pleasant and entertaining, especially for guests, and not much more than that. There weren't a lot of funny negative reviews for this one. My number 76, I believe this is the first entry this year that has moved upwards, not downwards, or brand new to the list. This is Battlestar Galactica. It is up 3 spaces from number 79, so that's a pretty negligible leap. I wouldn't put too much into that. Although I did play it a couple times in the last year, and that's possibly why, because I remember the game a little bit more succinctly. And I also remember playing a couple of games that tried desperately to imitate this game, and I was like, wow, I'd rather be playing Battlestar Galactica, like Dark Moon, which was a pretty big failure for my group. Battlestar Galactica is a very long game. That's the one thing everyone always says about it. It's very long, very complicated, but you know what? It's also an amazing trader game that is very thematic. And by the way, never watched Battlestar Galactica. I watched the series premiere, the mini series. That's it. I mean, I want to watch the rest of it. I haven't had the time. But even with that, I still get into the characters. I still get into the story of these Cylons taking over the ship and everyone cooperating together, desperately managing their population and their resources to try to make it back to Earth. It's just an amazing experience. And yes, it's long, but if you prep yourself for that, if you go into that knowing that, and you really get into the theme of the game, it's so good and so tense, and it's a solid game. What can I say? This game kind of came out of nowhere, and I think that it's going to be a perennial seller forever. That's how good that it is, even without expansions or anything like that. So, and it has yet to be fully duplicated, in my opinion. That is Battlestar Galactica from Fantasy Flight Games, my number 76. However, Morik256 says, want to play a game about robots? Want to make some science fiction? Want to mess around in a spaceship? Ha! The joke is on you. This is a European worker placement game in disguise. My number 75 is a very interesting game because both last year and this year, this was the game that shocked me the most when I was looking through the ratings for the negative second opinion rating. So I'm like, wow, there's a lot of negative ratings, and there's some very passionate people here who really hate this game. And that's the nature of Mansions of Madness from Fantasy Flight Games. It is a polarizing game. It's actually down 25 spots from number 46 last year because even more so than Battlestar Galactica that we just talked about, this is a super long game and very complicated to set up. And that is the primary complaints I heard about this through all the negative ratings. But I will tell you this. If you are willing to set aside the time for it, if you are willing to do the setup and have everyone get in the right frame of mind for it, it's amazing. This is one of the best Cthulhu games that is out there right now because it is telling a story and is telling it very well. To me, with the existence of this game, I'll go ahead and say it, and you can get mad at me all you want. This game existing makes it so that Betrayal at House of the Hill doesn't need to exist, at least in its current form. It just doesn't. It replaces it completely for me. Any small amount of fun I had playing Betrayal is completely wiped out by Mansions of Madness. This is a game where you set up a mystery. There's many different mysteries. Like there's a main story, but the way that it can play out is randomized, and only the keeper knows, the sort of storyteller / dungeon master for the game that you're playing, and the other players are investigators from the Arkham Horror universe who are trying to solve this mystery. And unlike some of the other games that are more like, okay, Cthulhu's popped up, we gotta go take care of him, this is more like there's a murder here, and now the house is haunted, and we have to figure out who killed the old man, and more subtle, nuanced stuff, so to speak. It has a more intimate feel to it, more of a haunted house feel to it, and I think that's what I like about it. It feels way more unique than any of these other globe-trotting adventure games that I have, although there's certainly a place for those, as you'll find out soon. But in any case, Mansions of Madness, such a good game with such a lot of interesting mechanisms to it too that all tie directly to the theme. That is my number 75. Galgamon was one of the many people who did not like this game. This game represents about 4 hours of my life that I will never get back. The only horror I experienced was being stuck in a game that wouldn't end. My number 74 is a very popular game, so popular that there's like 15 different versions of it, and I'm not sure that I'm exaggerating at this point. That is Love Letter, currently from AEG and formerly of just Kanai Factory, from designer Seiji Kanai over in Japan. It's actually down 36 spots from number 38 last year, and I think that's because I finally started to get burned out on it a little bit. Although I will say that right now, and what you'll be seeing on your screen is actually images of the Adventure Time version. Because of these last couple of versions that come out, like this, the Adventure Time and the Batman version, I am getting into it again because they're actually tweaking the game slightly and giving it a much-needed graphical makeover that I really appreciate. But regardless of all that, this is a solid filler game. It is so smooth. It is so easy to learn. It is the number one game I bring out when there's people that come to the group and say, what games have you played before? Monopoly, Risk. Okay, great. Let's warm up with some Love Letter because I need to get people into the right mindset of all the traditional things that you know are not the only thing that are out there. But let's play some simple games that can ease you into that. So you go to something like Love Letter, and then you go into something like, gateway games like I mentioned before, like Origin. But Love Letter is the starting point because it's just fast, it's just so easy, there's all these different themes that you can choose from, and I understand that it's random, and I understand that it's a bit too simple at times, but that's actually benefits to it because of how fast it plays. And for me, I know other people disagree, this actually works pretty well with 2 players, in fact. So Love Letter has always been a hit in our group since the inception of our group. I got into Love Letter at about the same time I started hardcore getting into gaming to begin with, so it's always going to have a soft spot in my heart. I don't know if I phrased that right. That sounds like I have a congenital heart condition, but regardless of that, Love Letter is easily my number 74. However, C3 Gaming says, I thought this was a game. I was mistaken. My number 73 is new to the list this year, and it's actually from Bezier Games. The game is called Suburbia Castles of Mad King Ludwig. See, the thing is, those 2 games are constantly compared to each other because they're the 2 big tile placement games from Bezier Games. I'm going to explain the differences to you very quickly. I'll keep this brief. Castles of Mad King Ludwig is fun. Suburbia is not. Okay, that's only from my personal point of view. But Suburbia never worked for me. I understand that it's a well-designed game. A lot of people in my group do love that game. It never worked for me. There just wasn't enough theme. It was too dry. There was too much math going on. Castles works for me, and I think it's for several reasons. I think it's because I get the theme at least a little bit more of building this castle, the different rooms going next to each other, and certain rooms getting penalized for being next to other rooms. You don't want to put the musician's room next to the sleeping quarters, things like that, and having to take the stairs to build lower levels. All of these different things make more sense to me, and I'm actually having fun putting out the tiles. Be like, I just love building it and putting it out there. The other thing is the whole aspect of the master builder. This could be a downside to the game because you can spend way too much time thinking about it. You get frozen up in analysis paralysis, but I'm willing to sacrifice that amount of time if that should happen in any game of mine, because the master architect or master builder or whatever it is just such an interesting mechanism where you can set the prices of things, and looking around at everyone's tableau and saying, like, what are you going to want, and what do I need, and I need to get some money this round, so how am I going to price things so I can get the most money as well? Super interesting. I like everything about this game. I actually have the expansion, but I haven't played it yet, the Secrets expansion. I can't wait. And I need to review it. I do have to get around to that at some point. But that's Castles of Mad King Ludwig, my number 73. So much better than Suburbia, in my humble opinion. However, Skip Sizemore says, a big, kludgy math problem in which some or all of the players at the table are sure to make mistakes. The gameplay is middling, and the theme is nonsensical. I don't get the charm. My number 72 is a game that went down 33 spots from number 39 last year, and I actually don't think it's because I didn't play this game. I think I played this game possibly too much at the beginning of the year or at the end of last year. And so I gave it a rest for a while. But it is called Trains. It's from AEG, originally from a Japanese game designer, and I can't remember the name of his original company, probably self-published. But it's Hisashi Hayashi, I believe, is his name. But Trains is a deck-building game, very similar to Dominion. And trust me, there were no shortage of negative comments pointing that out. Most people think this is a direct pilfer of Dominion, even more so than the other 50 deck builders that came out behind it, whatever. But the big difference here is that there is a board that you are actually placing out cubes representing your railroads and stations on. And to facilitate that, you play these different cards from your hand to put out stations, to build rails, to do it in certain ways. But every time that you do that, you make waste. And when you make waste, it's just like junk cards you have to put into your deck that's going to clog up your deck. So the game is all about being as efficient as possible, learning good ways to get rid of your waste, but at the same time trying to make like this area control game out on the board to get as many points as possible with your rails, while you still have to do all of these typical deck building elements and trying to get points from buying skyscraper cards and things like that. The game is just very smooth, very as the theme of the game is very efficient. It works as, yes, it is Dominion with a board in a sense, but to me, as you can tell, it is much better than Dominion, which is back in the 90s on my list, because it has that extra spatial element, and because the theme is strong, much stronger than Dominion, in fact. And the game just looks better as well. The Rising Sun expansion adds new maps and things, and it works for the most part. But even if you only have the base version, you have a ton of replayability right out of the box. Excuse me, I'm dying. That is Trains from AEG, my number 72. But Sachenti spoke for the people, many people, in saying that Dominion was the better game and that this was just a ripoff. He says, I've never seen a worse theft of another designer's ideas than I saw in Trains. That might be hyperbole. And the last one for today, my number 71, is Tragedy Looper. This is down 24 spots from number 47. You got to remember that last year, I'm not even sure the official English release was out yet, and I felt like I was the one that scooped everybody, and I was so excited for that game. I'm still excited about it. It's just not as new and fresh as it was last year, so that's why it dropped a bit. But Tragedy Looper was time travel before Time Stories came around. This is a game about several players, up to 3 players, working cooperatively together against a mastermind. The mastermind is working off a script where he is trying to make some sort of tragedy or multiple tragedies happen in this Japanese city. You're trying to either have a murder be committed where one character kills another out on these boards where character cards are moving around, or someone commits suicide, or some other dastardly things happen. The other players are trying to solve this mystery and stop these crimes from occurring, but inevitably they don't have enough information and they fail. at which point they loop back to the start of the day like Groundhog Day and try to do it all over again, taking the information they learned from before and now using it to their advantage to figure out more and more pieces of the puzzle. They have a certain amount of loops they need to complete this in, and if they don't, the mastermind wins. If they succeed, they succeed. The tragedy is averted. This is an amazing thematic game, super unique, very innovative. It was definitely in the running for most innovative game at the Dice Tower Awards. I'm not sure if it won or not, but it definitely should have if it didn't. And I think that even though it's a bit long, even though it's very, very difficult to learn, it is an experience like no other, and you should definitely at least give it a try. And yes, I do love the anime art style. That's my own personal little foible. But that is Tragedy Looper from Z-Man Games, currently my number 71. However, Inexorable 74 went on a saga here. I hate the theme. Why would I want to play a game with characters committing murder and or suicide? This can barely be characterized as a game. I do not think this game is fun. I hope I never see another copy of this game anywhere, and I adamantly refuse to play ever again. That's it for this week, or today. We will be back very soon with another set of 10 games in my top 100 games. Next time will be number 70 to number 61. We're getting closer and closer to the top 50. Stay tuned. Thank you so much. Take care.